All right, welcome back to episode 24 of Book Nook Brews, covering chapters 30
Yes.
to 38, plus the epilogue.
Yes.
And the ending of What the River Knows by
Isabel Ibañez.
Yes, I forgot her last name because it confuses me with Inez from
yeah,
the
and
actual story.
I've been doing that to myself as well.
Yeah.
Plus our Brews review.
Plus
at the very end.
our Brews review. It is finally here. We are done with this book, and I feel like there's going to be some thoughts.
I've been
said.
itching to talk about it.
So I guess we can just go into the recap so we can get more of those thoughts out.
Yeah, I don't really have any little updates as to what book, like if I finished a book or not. We've been pretty busy.
Yeah.
With our trip and whatnot. Although I did start a book. Actually, no, I did finish a book. It's called The Wall of Winnipeg by Mariana Zapata, I believe. Mariana Zapata. And then that was a pretty decent book. I liked it. It was cute. I read it on our way back from St. Pete.
Yeah.
And I was also half knocked out. No, I read it on the way and then a little bit on the way back, but I was honestly knocked out for the majority of it. And then I started a new one of hers called All the Roads Lead Here, I believe. I'm reading that one. I'll probably finish it by the next time. So, yeah, that's my little update. But I want to go ahead and get into this recap because I have many opinions, many thoughts, and I need to get them out. So let's go ahead and begin. So chapter 30. Finally, it came time for Inez to leave. Before she departs, she heads toward Whit to say her goodbyes, only for her to find out that he is also going to Cairo with her because he is also heading back home. Whit reveals that what he was looking for was a single sheet of parchment that Cleopatra's ancestor, also named Cleopatra, and was a renowned alchemist and spellcaster, had written before she died. However, he brushes this off as chasing a rumor. They got to Cairo on the last day of December. Just as she was about to send a telegram to her aunt in Argentina, she hears a familiar voice calling out to her. She turns and sees Elvira hugging her very enthusiastically. At first, Inez was mad that Elvira did this, but came around when she told her that she just wanted to be with her and felt as if she needed to be there with her, especially since she was there with her from the time that her parents would leave her behind to when she found out that her parents passed away. As they head back to her room, Elvira mentions to Inez that she has a letter from her father. Chapter 31. In the letter, her father tells her to continue to ask questions and search for the truth, for this will help her on her quest. Her mother's disloyal, and he hopes that she never lures Inez into her traps like she did to him. The reason he sent her the ring is because after he made the discovery in Philae, he didn't know who to trust and needed to keep that a secret from everyone, including her mother. At the end of the letter, he tells her to never stop looking for him. After she reads the letter, she shares everything that has happened to her since she got there to Elvira. From the golden ring being stolen by Mr. Sterling to being betrayed by her mother in Philae. The only thing she stayed quiet about was what she had with Whit or lack thereof. Elvira tells her that they need to go to the authorities, but Inez explains that because Mr. Sterling is a prominent member of society, he will have connections in government and that won't help. They need to be discreet about this. Elvira convinces Inez to go to the ball. If it's going to be their last night in Egypt, they might as well have fun. Whit's point of view. Ricardo gives Whitford money and one more task to do before he goes, to see if his sister is still in Cairo. He goes to see Peter Yardley, an antiquities officer and secretary to the consul general. Although prior to this he worked as a mercenary, trading in secrets, drugs, and antiquities. He gives him money and he tells him to be careful at the warehouse in Burlock. Peter stops him and points a gun at him. He tries to get Whit to sit down and either work for him or be dead. Whit throws a bottle of whiskey at him and shoots him dead, then flees. Chapter 32. At the ball, Inez finds out that Whit is a lord when he introduces himself to her cousin. Whit and Inez dance, both of them wanting one last memory together. At the ball, they see Mr. Sterling, and Whit reveals to Inez that Ricardo wants him to get the ring back from Mr. Sterling, who they suspect is part of the company, because that would stop him or anyone else to find Cleopatra's tomb. Inez tries to convince Whit in allowing her to help, but he refuses. As the clock hits midnight, Whit softly brushes his lips against her cheek and then disappears into the crowd. Chapter 33. Back in her room, Elvira tells Inez she's going to have morning tea on the terrace with the man she danced with. Inez reminds her that she needs a chaperone and then agrees on Inez being there with her. The next morning, a loud knocking awakes her, and it's Whit. Apparently, around 11 in the morning, the hotel clerk saw someone that looked like Inez get into a carriage and leave the hotel. Inez tells him that Elvira was supposed to wake her up to go on her morning tea with a guy. They go to the lobby and Salam gives Inez a message that arrived to her. It was from her mom, explaining that she took drastic measures to protect her. So she turned in Elvira instead of her to who knows who, and tells her to leave Cairo again before they realize that they took the wrong girl. Whit thinks they took her to a warehouse by the docks where potential smuggling activities have occurred. Inez tries to convince Whit that she needs to go because that should have been her regardless. And once her mom hears about what's happening, she will comfort her because she is quote unquote her mother's weakness. Whit advises her against it. Her mother is awful. She's allowing her cousin to die, probably killed her father, and then lied to her about it. She's manipulating her. She must have done something unforgivable, probably stole something, and now they want her life in exchange. After Whit leaves the room, she escapes and goes after Elvira. Chapter 34. Inez arrives at the docks just as she was about to call out to a stranger. Whit covers her mouth and pulls her backward. They bicker a bit, allowing a man to creep behind them while pointing a gun at them. Whit hits the assailant, but Inez picks up the dropped gun and shoots, firing straight into the air. Whit attempts to use this as a distraction to throw another punch, but the pair don't get that far. Instead, they get captured by the men. Inez was knocked out with chloroform, and when she woke up, she was in a tomb. Luckily-ish, Whit is in there with her, so she goes to him. Before they talk much, 4 men appear at the head of the tomb to grab them. They ask Inez where her mother is, but every time she said, "I don't know," they slapped her hard. After she told them she doesn't know for a 3rd time, they seal the tomb, leaving her alone with a beaten up Whit. Chapter 35. Once Whit woke up, he escapes the knots that tied his wrists together, thanks to keeping his elbows apart to allow for a margin of slack to release his wrist from the knot. After he releases both of their arms from the rope, they look around the tomb for a way out, but there isn't. The magnitude of their situation hits them in that moment. Whit tells Inez how he was dishonorably discharged. Essentially, he was trying to warn General Charles George Gordon, the person he was under in his troop, but he didn't make it to him in time. He was beheaded by the Mahdi's on the palace steps. When he went after General Gordon, Wellesley, the head of the relief force, had forbade him to, so when he came back, he was dishonorably discharged. Inez is convinced her mother will come after her once she hears of what's happening, but Whit isn't convinced of that. Whit then tells Inez to forgive her for what he's about to do, and he kisses her. They pretty much make out for a bit. And they continue to make out until they hear a muffled noise at the entrance. Inez is convinced it's her mother coming to save them. Then suddenly a blast covers them. Chapter 36. Inez calls out to her mother when she sees a figure approaching. But it's not her, it's her uncle. They talk for a moment about leaving when a gunshot pierces Tío Ricardo's left arm. Mr. Burton, an American who once asked her to dinner and give her mail, was now pointing at them with a gun. He wants to know where her mother is at, but Inez states again that she doesn't know. Her mother left her behind in Filet. He brings in Elvira and asks again where Lourdes is at. Ricardo tells him to release his nieces and he'll tell him where she's at. Mr. Burton moves the gun to Elvira's temple and shoots, killing her instantly. He asks Ricardo again, and he says he can only make a guess, and that would be Amarna, to look for Nefertiti. Then Inez grabs Ricardo's magical necktie and wrings it out to Mr. Burton, covering his face in scalding hot water. That gets him for a moment, but then he pulls Inez backwards, and Inez grabs and lifts the rifle, shooting Mr. Burton dead. Chapter 37. They are back at the hotel, and Inez is blaming herself for what happened to Elvira. After a while, her uncle wakes up, and Inez asks him what is going on, because she deserves to know the truth. And so he finally tells her. He tells her that one day her mom started to act strange. She would claim to be bored and stay back in Cairo. From that moment, she began to lie to them and became obsessed with searching for alchemical documents. During the last season, her father and Ricardo had come back to Cairo unexpectedly. When he was on his way to a meeting with Monsieur Maspero, he saw her mother with a group of men who he knew to be curators for the company. He tried to warn her, but she refused to listen. Around this time, her father began to suspect that Lourdes was having an affair and also started to act strange, hiding things from Ricardo and not trusting him, which was more likely than not due to Ricardo asking Cayo to forgive Lourdes for the affair because he still thought he could change her mind. But then Cayo started to believe that Ricardo was scheming with Lourdes too. And then her parents left, probably to Cairo, but no one had seen them, hence why they were pronounced dead. Inez tries to convince her uncle to let her stay, but he says she can't at first and then tells her she can, but will need to find a place to stay. She assumed she would be staying with them at Shepherd, but Ricardo then asks her with what money. Her money isn't hers until she marries. Chapter 38. The next day, Whit comes to Inez's room and sees that she's packing. He asks her if she's just going to give up, and she tells him that's all that she can do. She won't have money until she marries, so all she can do is go back home and marry the son of the consul, Ernesto. Whit then tells her that she can't marry him and to marry him instead. Epilogue. Porter opens the message he received and reads it for the 100th time. Inez fell for it. Porter is happy that Whit kept his word. Now it was time to collect, and that's how What the River Knows.
I think you missed an important chunk in that last. You didn't put Whit's point of view.
Yeah.
Because that was important for the epilogue.
Oh, God.
So what happened in Whit's point of view is he was back in his room before he had visited Inez.
Mm-hmm.
Went back to his room or whatever that night. That same night where, I guess it's the same night that it all happened. I don't know. But he was writing a message out with ink. And he was like stressed out. He was worrying that, I forgot what the exact words he used, but he was just worrying, like writing that message. And he finishes signing off with his brother's name on the envelope. Like it's going to his brother. And then I guess he was like angry because after he finished writing out his brother's name, he just threw the pen and it rolled off onto the street or whatever through like an open window or balcony or
Someone
whatever.
has a present.
I don't know. And then as soon as he did that, someone came up. He's like, oh, you called for someone to come up here? Like the room service guy. And he's like, yeah, I need you to mail this out. And the guy was said to what address? And he's like, you already know what address. It's the same one that I've been sending to all this whole week or these past few times. And he's like, yeah, but I don't recall the address.
Yeah.
And he said something like the 10 steps from hell in London or something like that. And he's like, all right, this will get mailed out first thing in the morning. And then, yeah, he just sends him off. And then he starts getting drunk off of whiskey. And then that's when he goes to Inez. And he's the way that he's present there, he's drunk. That was also a big part. He didn't just show up and start saying stuff. He was drunk. Inez was recognizing that. And she's like, this is not the guy that I would normally talk to. This is not the guy that would call me a sweetheart. And this is not the guy that I was talking to this whole time. And then goes the epilogue, which cuts to Porter receiving the message, Porter being his brother.
That says Inez fell for it.
With the message saying Inez fell for it. And that's where that ends. So the message that Whit was writing out was Inez fell for it and was sent out to his brother, Porter.
Yeah, I realized I had left that out. And I believe he had also made like a comment to himself, like something about his family would finally like be happy to hear back from him or something.
Yeah.
But I guess that family is just his brother.
Yeah, because also in that, while he was writing that, he was saying he doesn't understand why he cut her out from her life and all that stuff, referring to the person he is, or he was engaged to or marrying or whatever. So basically, he's no longer engaged, and he wrote back, or he wrote to his brother saying Inez fell for it. Basically meaning he's not going back. He's staying where he's at because now Inez fell for it. Right. And I have a theory for that, but I guess we'll start from the beginning now that the recap is done. I guess we just addressed the elephant in the room. Well, one of the two elephants. Elvira is dead.
I felt nothing about her death. Nothing.
I felt shock more than anything. I was like, no way they actually killed someone off. Like,
well,
like,
if they were going to do it, they were going to do it to someone not that important.
Yeah, like we were theorizing last episode. It was like, it's going to be her uncle or whatever. Like when her uncle got shot, I was like, no way. But then I started reading the words and I was like, okay, that sounds more like a graze. And then later the guy was like, yeah, that only grazed his shoulder. Get him up. I'm like, all right, yeah, so he's just soft. And but then when I read, I was just kind of like skimming that part because it was a lot of blah blah blah. And then I saw Elvira's name, I saw a gunshot, I saw Inez wanting to scream, and then I saw just Elvira falling forward in blood, and I was like, wait, I gotta reread that. Was that correct? And it ended up being her being shot dead, and I was like, well, that sucks. As in, like, the person who died.
Yeah.
Like, that was... I mean, yeah, you have that cousin connection, but that's all you gave us.
Yeah.
You know, there was no connection to Elvira. We got her for 2 chapters. Or, you know, like, that's what it felt like, you know?
There was no personal connection to me feeling like, oh, no.
Other than her always repeating, this was the person that got me through all of this. Like, okay, you need more than that.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Or, like, she came all this way to be with me, and it's like, okay.
Because before she showed up, the only thing we got was the beginning chapter.
Yeah.
Right? Where she was like growing up, whatever. She got the letter that her parents were dead. Cool. We heard nothing of her until she showed up, except for the fact that Inez would be using her name in Cairo.
Yeah.
To like hide her identity or whatever. But other than that, between the first chapter, before she like ran away, and then until Elvira showed up, there was nothing about Elvira.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing.
And I think that's one of the reasons why this death did nothing to me. Had it been Ricardo, then I'd be like, bruh, no.
Yeah.
But Elvira, like, you really just brought a character, an innocent character back just to kill her off.
Yeah.
And it made no sense.
It seemed very pointless.
That whole part, like the warehouse, this set of chapters really irked me.
Yeah.
And really docked a lot of my like better opinions about this book in just these last few chapters. I am really annoyed with Inez.
Yeah.
First
off, she's a terrible shot.
What? Yeah. Well, and you expect that because she didn't really have that much practice.
But you'd think with the practice, like the whole point of that was to like, that was kind of like, I figured by her learning before that she was going to end up using that. Like maybe it was going to be one of those things where it wasn't addressed in the book, but in the time that passed, she might have been practicing or something. Right?
Okay, yeah.
And like it was kind of, what's the word? Alluding to it when it was first mentioned.
When
like,
they said goodbye at the end as well.
Exactly. It was like kind of maybe like that's the way she was going to keep her memory of her or something.
But
right?
no, she shoots and he just goes up in the air.
Yeah.
And then
the shot she does make it kills the guy, but after he kills.
Also,
like, yeah.
Her stubbornness and like her character really got to me this last set of chapters.
Yeah.
Like you're telling me you went to the warehouse and were about to call out to a fucking stranger.
Yep.
Had it not been for Wit, you would have been dead.
Yep.
And even then, I really hated the fact that they didn't really have that much combat. Granted, I know they were down people, like they didn't really had enough to like live up to that, but like Wit, give me something, my dude. He did as what he could. He just
had no help.
Yeah, he had no help. And that's where I wish Inez's character was just a little bit stronger in that fact. It's like, yeah, how are you going to teach someone how to like fight? But I just wish she had a little bit more to give than just like, oh no, I guess it's time to like give up. Watch out. Like, that whole part just really irked me.
Yeah.
This is one of the few times that I'm gonna say this, but the whole makeout scene,
yeah, woo!
I
say it
could have done without it.
Yeah,
I really could have done without it.
Yep.
I didn't need it. Why in that moment are they making out?
Hey, let's make out in this dead person's fucking cave.
Like, oh my god.
Like, yeah, we're about to die, sure, but we're also in a tomb. Like,
yeah, this is the hottest place to make out. Like, no.
Yeah.
I was so, I just angry. And then her dumbass.
Thinking it was going to be her mom saving her.
Oh, yeah, she was like...
Oh, mommy's coming. No, bitch, here comes super uncle.
But like, dude, your mother betrayed you. You weren't... And she's like, I'm her vulnerability under the belly. Bruh, shut the fuck up. Get real. Like, you
if you
are
were the
supposedly...
weakness, would she have left you that first time, bro?
Like, you are supposed to be so much stronger and smarter than that. And that's the thing. Her character has like gone downhill throughout the book.
Like it was kind of being built to her being that character, and then that kind of just all got disregarded.
It's like her character at the beginning and her character at the end are two different characters, and it made no sense.
Worse.
Huh?
But for the worse.
But
like
for
sometimes
for the worse.
It'd be like for the better, right? Like it'd be like it started off with this wimpy, stubborn person, and it would end up being this great person that learned from their mistakes and all that. This went backwards.
Yeah.
This got worse from the mistakes that she's made. And
she's like never learned. Yeah. And she is very naive, which is crazy to me because of how secretive and like smart she was at the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's like, you were a little bit naive at the beginning, but you got very naive towards the end.
Yeah.
And all of that smartness that you had, is like nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
I
think the problem was the expectation that was set.
Yes.
Because, with the mentioning of the family that she was in, the dad, the mom, the power that she has and all that stuff, you thought we were going to go uphill, right? And it was being built like she was this special character that was going to do something special at the end. But she ended up just getting worse. It's not this person that they were leading her out to be.
Yeah. And I feel like I was really crossing my fingers at the very beginning because of how she received that letter and her dad told her to never stop looking for him.
Yeah.
I was like, ooh, like now we're getting to the good part. Like, where is he? And then all of this happened. It's like,
also,
like, honestly, the epilogue could have just been a little bit about her dad in a mysterious way. I could have probably done without it, or I don't know. Go ahead. Sorry.
What happened to the ring? What happened to Sir Evelyn, the ring, all that? Like after the fighting sequence, it kind of just all was like turned into just marry me.
Yeah.
What happened to everything else that was being built up?
Mm-hmm.
Like I know this was set up for a second book, obviously, right? But I feel like we should have gotten a little bit more.
I feel like that situation should have been resolved in this book. That ring situation should have been resolved in this book.
Yeah.
Not the second one. Like, why do you have to take that ring from the first book to the second? Nah.
Unless that ring is kind of like the whole thing about the series. Like if that's going to be the thing. But at the same time, I feel like it should have been set up in a better way if that were the case.
Yeah.
Because it felt very much like I lost my ring. I'm going to find it by the end of the book type of thing, like it felt that way from the beginning. It's like, oh no, he stole my ring. And I was like, okay, that's going to be the resolution at the end, right? She's going to find it. That's going to be the fucking Green Lantern ring. She's going to turn into this fucking thing. Or like the Ben 10 watch, right? She's going to put it on. She's going to turn into Cleopatra. Something, right? Like it was being made out to be like the solution to thing. And then we just never saw it again.
Yeah, no.
The only other time we saw it was when Sir Evelyn was wearing it, right? Or was it...
Yeah, no,
right?
Mr. Sterling.
Sterling.
At the ball.
Sterling, yeah.
Which... It's like I left a lot of details out about the ball because it's just not that that important.
It's stupid.
It was just like a bunch of things that we could have just gone through.
It was literally there to have what was her name?
So that Ines and Wit can dance.
No, what's her name? The cousin.
Elvira.
Elvira. That's where she met the guy that she was gonna go see in the morning, right, for tea. But it ended up being...
And that's like so great because we don't even know how this person looks like. It's just a person with like no memory of how they look. Like,
but it was
details.
supposed that's the person that kidnapped her, no? Like it was a setup?
Yes, but who was he?
No, I mean, no, yeah. Oh. Like it was the person that worked for whoever the mom is working for, right?
And even then, that whole thing, like... That's still much of like a gray area of like what her mom is doing.
Yeah, but I feel like that's okay. Like that one is going to go into the second book. Like that whole problem is like that. I felt okay with that not being resolved because it's like, okay. But the way it ended, I was not okay with.
But it's like also, I think what bothered me is that Mr. Burton's like, oh, or someone said, boss told you not to kill her. We need her alive. And Inez is like, you have a boss? Like, bro.
Like, everyone has a boss.
Yeah. He's like, everyone has a boss. So there's someone above them.
Yeah.
That I wish we at least had some sort of a clue. Sure, this can go into the second book, but I almost feel like it probably won't even be talked about in the second book.
I think it should. I mean, I think it will. Because of all right, not I think it will. I would like it to, and I hope it does. Should. Because that is 90% of the story right now.
Yeah.
The other 10% is useless romance. And, well, I also, I guess this is a good way to, like, lead into that whole, the note at the end, sending it to his brother Porter. I have a theory. So I think what happened there, and, like, with the whole Inez fell for it. First off, we called it. There's that betrayal, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's an evil betrayal. So what my theory is, yes, he was engaged. And yes, he was engaged since he was, what was it, 10?
Yeah,
He was
some
engaged
sort of
pretty
young
early,
age.
right? I think he was engaged early for money purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? His family needed the money maybe, and he was marrying into the crown or whatever, right? I think it has to do with his sister being sick. I'm sticking with that. Because his sister's the one that he always brought up, right? It was his sister, nobody else. It was like, yeah, he talked about his parents, but because they were pissed off at him for not being there or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But the one that he always talked about caring and all that stuff is his sister. I'm thinking his sister's sick. They got him, quote unquote, married off very early so his family could get that money to help his sister.
The dowry, yeah.
Right? And that was going to be that. That was going to be the solution to that. But obviously he didn't like the fact that he was being engaged that early. Like he said, he's only met her twice, whatever, right? Then he learned right now, that he cut her off, or he got cut off by her from her life. He's no longer engaged. So, you know how he had told the male person, he was like, it's the same address I've been using this whole time. I feel like that whole time they were him and his brother were talking about that whole thing. It's like, oh yeah, she's cutting me off, whatever, now I can't go back and stuff like that. And I think the plan was, and the brother being what's the word? When you're an accomplice in this, they're trying to trick Inez into falling for Whit to be able to marry him for the money, because I don't know if you remember when Inez was talking about staying here and the uncle was like, no, but with what money or whatever, and she was talking about her inheritance, and she's like, I could buy a kingdom with what I have. And then he's like, yeah, but you need to be married. In that scene, Whit was like, a kingdom? Like, you can buy a kingdom? So he basically got an idea of how much fucking money she had, right? So now I'm thinking, all right, he got cut off. So him and his brother were scheming. He realized Inez was a good option to get money from. So the whole plan was to have her fall for him to kind of get that marriage going. And that's why at the end he was like, marry me instead. But with his brother being an accomplice, his brother is obviously saying, marry her for the money, right? Whit was doing that, but in the process actually fell for Inez. And that's where he's kind of like conflicted, because he's marrying her for the money, but he's also falling for her.
So you think it's for money purposes?
For his sisters.
Yeah.
Which
would make sense because he was also looking for the alchemy parchment, and if you know anything about alchemy, sometimes it has healing properties.
Exactly.
Perfulment alchemist.
Yeah.
But it makes sense that it's like, yeah, that was maybe his first plan. That didn't go well. So now he has to figure out another way to like help his ill sister. Yeah. And that's probably the way to go.
Yeah.
I want to agree. I feel like there's still maybe something else attached to it aside from just like money and helping the sister. Because it's just
I think he genuinely has feelings for Inez now.
Oh yeah, no, I think we've all kind of seen that he kind of does. He cares for her in a different way, maybe a little bit more now that we've like seen them like make out or whatnot. Yeah. But like prior to the set of chapters, you could see that he really cares for her. Yeah. Or at least tries to keep an eye out for her. By the way, him being a lord makes so much sense as to why he was caring so much about her, like her status, her appearance, and whatnot. because he's used to that kind of lifestyle prior. And I think we said that before because we thought that he could just be some sort of royalty or something. But he's a lord, which in it itself is kind of like it's a higher status than just being like someone, I guess, common per se.
Yeah.
So, I wish we got a little bit more of the dad, which I'm assuming that's probably also part of the second book.
Of Inez's dad?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I thought that's what the ring was going to be for. I thought it was going to be a little more about, hey, we found the ring, we got it back, resolution, let's lead this to my dad, and have that be the cliffhanger. Not marry me instead.
I wish. That would have been so good. Yeah. But that would have required more pages. And this book was done. Like, this was like a very small set of chapters, and nothing much really happened. Like, a lot happened, but it's like a lot that probably could have been in an email, to be quite honest. Yeah. This could have been an email. It's still fuck Ludres every day.
Yeah,
she's still a bitch.
Yeah.
But now I like, Inez, you're so fucking stupid.
Yeah. For
having that much faith in your mother. Like, she betrayed you. What makes you think she cares? Yeah. Just because she's telling you through note, like, we're really gonna go back to, like, I don't know, is that like her love language of just being told stuff rather than being shown? I don't know. It just, when I told you, I was like, oh, just finished it and I have many opinions. Yeah. It's because Inez made me so angry just reading these set of chapters. She made me so angry. I was not expecting this turn. No. I was really hoping for something more. And I'm kind of bummed that this is how it went.
And I guess with that, we get to the Brews review.
Yes. yes. Alrighty. So, my good sir, what was your rating for book characters?
So, book characters, I gave it, I think I was very generous with this rating, but I might change the final rating at the end. I give it a 4.
I gave it a 3.75.
I gave it a 4 just because there wasn't any character that I felt like maybe we need a little more. Like Elvira was there, but I was like, at the same time, she didn't have to be.
Yeah.
Right. So I didn't care about learning more about her. We already knew what we had to know, but it was just kind of dropped on us of her importance at the end. But just each individual character was okay to me. Right. Wit's like secrecy was good for me. It wasn't, I needed to learn more about him and stuff like that.
You were kind of just patiently waiting for that to unfold on its own.
Yeah, and so far I'm satisfied. Like, yeah, there's still stuff we have to learn about him, but with the cliffhanger and the way it ended and stuff like that, is like there's more to unpack there. But I'm okay with the pace that it's going at.
Yeah.
Ricardo, I think we learned, like, he had a huge arc kind of jump. Like, at first we thought he was an asshole, but then we just realized it was just kind of like tough love type of thing. But that, I felt like that kind of got unpacked decently well. Then I think the rest were kind of side characters. There's Inez, who we already expressed went downhill and all that stuff, but I guess that's where it's a 4 instead of like a 5, right? With everybody else, if everybody else was as decent as they were, and then Inez was a decent character development thing, it would have been a 5, because I had no problem with any other character. But Inez's development at the end is what kind of made me put it out of 4.
Oh yeah, no, she's the biggest reason why my score is a 3.75.
Yeah,
honestly, probably would have done a 3.5, but I grew to really enjoy Wit and Ricardo. They were my favorites from this story.
I mean, there's Kareem too. Like,
yeah. But like Wit, like he said, his secrecy did not bother me at all throughout this book. Like, not usually I'm like, I need to find more. I need to know more.
Yeah.
But his character, the mystery around him worked so well. And I think just that part of him in the story, it's a good combination.
Yeah.
Ricardo, like you said, it's that tough love.
Mm-hmm.
He, like, at first I was kind of iffy about him, but you understand his reasoning ish behind it all, and it makes sense.
This actually, a lot of it reminds me of Sanctuary of the Shadow, but like the very good bits of it, like this whole like kind of like scenario. Like, there was Salazar, right, who we were at first like, oh, this guy's an asshole, this guy's the villain, this guy's going to end up. But then we realized with the little bits and pieces that we got from him was, okay, it's actually for a reason. Mm-hmm. Similar to Ricardo, right? And also with Wit, we got little pieces that built. But they were introduced in such a way that was... okay, right? Like, it was at the right moment.
And I think, basically, at least in this book, they're prominent characters compared to Sanctuary of the Shadows, where, and they're not so much. I feel like this book is a step above a debut compared to like...
oh, yeah. Oh, because, this was a debut.
Yeah, this is a debut novel.
Yeah, this is how you do that.
But. Yeah, this is better done than Sanctuary of the Shadows, in my opinion, at least for me. The characters were good. Inez is the one who really faltered so much. You set her up to be some great person and strong-headed, stubborn, and then she just goes down, down, down. And it's such a disappointment because some of her actions just didn't make sense with the character we thought she was going to be. Yeah. Elvira is like... if you wanted her death to be more impactful, you should have built her up more. Yeah. Like, she should have probably escaped with her at the very beginning. But then again, this is not Elvira's story. Yeah. Like, if you really wanted to hurt me with a death, should have been Ricardo. Maybe even Wit. We can throw him into the mix. Yeah. But Elvira, no, it just doesn't make sense. So... that's why I gave the characters a 3.75. They were developed pretty decently. I needed a little bit more. Yeah. And Inez's drastic change from the beginning to the end really was unfortunately, the part that just really brought this down. Yeah. For relatability, what'd you give it?
I did a 3.
Yeah, I give it a 3.5.
To me, it was a 3 because one, to me, didn't really relate, right? I couldn't tie to anything in my life or myself, but I can see where people could. So I just put it straight down, kind of like the middle, and was like, yeah, if it's relatable to some people, it is. If not, it's still decent. So I just put it at a 3.
I also gave it a 3.5 for that same reason. I could very much like relate to Inez's like curiosity and having that need to just ask questions and just not like step away until you get those answers. Yeah. So in that regard, I found that very like, yeah, I can see parts of myself in Inez at the very beginning. And then as we got towards the book, not really so much. So... yeah, I also get a 3.5. Yeah. For experience and enjoyment,
I gave that a 4.
Me too.
Because overall it was a great experience. I enjoyed reading. There was never a part where I was like, dude, like this can be skipped, right? Like, yeah, there was the romance and all that stuff, but even then I could get through that. It's not like other books that we read and stuff like that. And, I gave it a 4. I could have given it a 5, but at the same time, the ending and all these, like, having these thoughts in our head of, like, being nitpicky should bring down some points, right? Because, like, yeah, you could have opinions about any book, right? Even a 5 out of 5 will have opinions on it, but it wouldn't have this strong of opinions, right? If we thought for sure something could have gone a different way, right, I feel like that'll get docked some points. Now, just because you have opinions on it doesn't mean you can't enjoy it, but the fact that these opinions that we had kind of took us out of the story itself is where I fault it.
Yeah.
Right? Because you could have a 5 out of 5, you could have strong opinions about it, but really enjoy how it was done. In this case, we enjoyed it. We have strong opinions on it, but those strong opinions was because something happened that altered how we felt about it originally, right? So that's where I went into a 4. I didn't want to be too harsh because, again, it was most of the book that was enjoyable. The ending was where it kind of took us out.
Yeah.
So it was like majority of the time it was very enjoyable. So.
Like, I agree a lot. I gave it a 4 because throughout the whole reading experience, I really did enjoy it, and I didn't like find myself very like annoyed until the very end.
Yeah.
Where there was many parts where I had to pause and be like, are you serious? Is this what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And then going back to read it again or more of it, and it's just not being satisfied because the book could have been more or set up for the second book. But I feel like even the second book isn't fully set up. I feel like there's so many loose ends that at least one of them should have been tied in this first book.
Yeah.
Sure, leave a couple for the second book, but you left a lot.
Like at this point, it doesn't feel like the second book is going to be its own book. It's literally going to be a long continuation
of the first
what
one.
This left off, right?
Yeah.
Which, if it's a series, sure, I guess you can kind of say, hey, that's what the second book is supposed to be. But then why not make the first book a bit longer then, if that's the case, right? There's a second book because there's supposed to be a separate story that's going to happen from all of this.
Yeah, and I feel like the better moment, well, I'll get to that. I'll get into like the storyline later, but overall I enjoyed the book. It was very enjoyable read. Nothing to where I'm like, oh, I have to read this again. So, but it's nothing to where like, oh, I'm so excited, like I want to read. So
yeah,
that's why like a nice 4 was a good place for this.
Yeah.
All right, writing style. What'd you give it?
A 4.
I gave it a 3.75.
I liked it going back and forth between wits and just the story, right? You know, I like that. But I didn't give it a 5 because sometimes it felt like Wit's point of view was unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
Or what was given inside it was unnecessary. We needed his point of view, but for us, like in a other way or something, right? It felt like either it was completely unnecessary or it could have been given in a different way. And that's why it wasn't perfect to me. So that's why I give it a 4, because it was still something I enjoyed and I liked getting the other person's perspective, but I just felt like it could have been done a little better.
Yeah, I gave it a 3.75 because things like that, where the point of view just was not as strong.
Yeah.
Where it didn't make any sense. I feel like the author kind of got a little bit more of the hang of it towards the end of the book. But at the very beginning, it was just like, honestly, this just could have been like, take it out.
Like there was one that was just a sentence, right? Like that one was kind of like...
Yeah, it wasn't that much. It was just him like explaining like his feelings for...
Not even. I think that's another one. But I'm talking about like there was one... where it was just like, damn, or something like that.
I think I remember the part that you're talking about. But yeah, it's like, is it really necessary? Another reason why I gave it like a 3.75 because while the writing wasn't like fully like out of this world and like always kept me immersed, I really like the detail and the descriptions that Isabel Ibañez like wrote in this book.
Yeah.
A lot of the details and the description, imagery, everything I really enjoyed. I also really enjoyed the parts like in the tomb. Like those were like some of probably my favorite parts in the book when they were in Filet. And Inez like got to adventure. A lot of that was perfectly described, and I can imagine that a lot. And those were like some of the standout pieces. Now, the way the romance was written in this book was, I'm not a fan of it. Honestly, it could have just been two friends. I didn't really need it. It could have been done without. I get it. Like at the end, it's for like the whole marriage plot or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it just wasn't written in a way to where I'm like, oh, I see the two interaction between them. Like I do see it more from Wit than I see it from Inez.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because usually you see it more, I guess, like from the women. It just Wit, I could see it, but I could also interpret that as just being friends, a friend that cares. Inez is just like infatuation. Yeah. And I just don't see the need for it. It just doesn't make any sense. So it just, there were some standout moments, but they were also the way she wrote like some of the relationship between these characters, how the death made no sense. All of those really brought it down to me, like brought it the score down to like a 3.75-ish.
Yeah.
For storyline, what'd you give it?
I give it a 5.
You give it a 5?
Yeah. I was like, that's because I took storyline and the, what is it, experience. Mm-hmm. I kind of put those two separate. Like I like put those aside. The story I like, right? The whole, my parents died, so like not really. Let me go look for them. All that I enjoyed. Like with the ending, the way that it happened, sure kind of detoured me from the enjoyment. Mm-hmm. But I think the storyline, like the basic storyline, the foundation of the book, is really good. Whether it was executed properly or not, that's another thing. But the actual storyline itself, I think, is a good one. And that's where I give it a 5. The storyline itself is good. Could it have been done better? Maybe. But I think the idea of the storyline, the idea of the book, what is actually happening, is a really good one. I just think, it goes back into the experience and the enjoyment and the writing style and stuff like that, where it's kind of like, I could be like nitpicky on how things were done. But I think the basic idea of the book is a good one for me.
I gave it a 3.5. I kind of did take into account like the storyline and the execution a little bit hand in hand. Just because I agree, the basic storyline, the foundation of the book, I enjoyed and I understand. And for this story, it makes sense. I mean, it works. I just feel like the storyline also has many plot holes. It has many, like, what do you mean? Like, how is this happening? And yes, a lot of this can be attributed to there being a second book, but it goes back to what I said, that at least some loose ends should have been tied in this book. Not leaving all the loose ends towards the second book or X amount of books that there's going to be in this series. I needed a little bit more to be tied together because I was really looking forward to getting some answers, and we did. I needed something to be like, okay, this storyline has came to its end. we see where it got us. Like you said, for the ring, it would have been amazing if that got resolved in this book, rather than leaving it and like the marriage and everything, all of that for the second book. Something needed to be tied together and done in this book for me. And a lot of the decision making and the death that made no sense, the romance at the very like the romance storyline could have just not been there for me.
Yeah,
could have been done differently. It little things like that is why I brought it down to a 3.5. Doesn't mean that the story wasn't good. I enjoyed it. It's just the storyline could have been done a little bit better, and that's why for me I did kind of put like storyline along with the execution of it, because to me it kind of goes hand in hand. Yeah. Because sure, you're gonna have like a good idea for it, but did you really do that idea justice? You kind of did.
That is true.
It just, you needed more.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I didn't think about it that way, and it makes sense because like for me, it's the same way for like shows and stuff, right? Like for all the Marvel shows that I thought sucked, it's like the idea was there. It's a good plot for a show, but it was just the way it was done sucked. Therefore, the show sucked.
And like for example,
right?
like for The Martian, the storyline was great and it was executed very well. Yeah. It was done great. The Fourth Wing also done very well. Like, and that's a great idea. Like, this is a great book to kind of compare it to, because The Fourth Wing is a series and
it tied a lot of things within that first book. It tied some
things like done, and then you're left with that big cliffhanger about her like brother reappearing, because there's still more ongoing. And it made, like, in that book it felt tied together with still like, oh, there's still so much that we're gonna find out later on. Yeah. In this book, it's like so much, it was just kind of just cut abruptly. Yeah. That's the best way to describe it. Yeah, it's like you kind of just stopped it at where all the action is happening, and now what? Yeah. Like there was not much of a resolution to anything. I just have to wait for like the next book. And so that's kind of like the best way. It's just kind of just cut. True. So that's why like I gave it a 3.5. So overall, my score was a 3.7. Yeah.
Mine turned out to be a straight 4 out of 5.
Oh, really?
But I had mentioned earlier that I was going to change it. And I think now that we had that explanation of like the storyline and all that stuff, I was very generous by giving it a 5. So I'd probably take that down to a 4 maybe, and then in total it would probably end up being like a 3.6, 3.7 as well. I was just going to move it from a 4 to a 3.5. But I feel like that might be too harsh based on my other scores. So I'll probably stick with like a 3.8, 3.7, maybe around the same, right? It's not a 3.5, not a 4 to me, somewhere in between.
No, I agree. Like for me, a 3.5 was just decent.
Yeah, it was a little bit better than that.
Yeah, like this book was still better than just like, It was good. It just, with this being her debut novel. Yeah. I have that. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. Like you're still finding your whole groove of writing and writing this story, this world. And I can be more forgiving towards that. Yeah. This makes much more sense than like Sanctuary of the Shadows. That for me, that debut just did not hit with me. Yeah. But this is a strong, like higher than a 3.5, but not yet a 4. Because for me, a 4 is just solid all around. This to me is just still not solid enough. Yeah. But it's a good book. Yeah. It's a good book to, kind of read, and it has that adventure. It just needed a little bit more polish in certain things. So.
But like you said, with that being a debut is like that comes with time. right, with a little more experience. So, yeah, I think a 3.7, 3.8 isn't a bad
Yeah, no, that's a good score
for this. So, but as always, our ratings are our ratings. Go get the book, go borrow the book, and read it yourself. Make your own opinion of it. Whatever we say doesn't sit well with us might be amazing to you, and vice versa. So,
and whoever did read this along with us, I don't know how much of an audience we have, but I'd be curious to see how you felt about this, because everyone is going to have a different opinion and a different thought about this book. It's just every person is going to experience the book very differently.
Yeah.
And what may be like not quite a solid book could be a fantastic or a 5 out of 5 for you.
Yeah.
Maybe this is exactly right up your alley. And then other people's might just be completely like, nope, not enough. Nope. So just, grab the book, read it yourself, formulate your own opinion on it, because we are just two people of many that have more like than not picked up this book to give it a read.
Yeah.
And with that being said, for next month, sir, what are we reading again, and what are the chapters?
Oh, yeah. We will be reading Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, who is also the author of The Martian that we read last month. And our first set of chapters that we'll be getting through for next week are chapters 1 through 7. So yeah, that starts next week. And I'm excited. It's a bit of a chunky book, but I'm excited based off of all the reviews it has gotten and stuff.
Yeah, me too.
And then based off The Martian and how that was written, I'm very, very excited. So we'll see how that goes.
Yet another sci-fi. We're at it again. I'm excited for it.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be it. Again, next week, chapters 1 through 7 of Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. And that will be all for this episode.
Yeah. See you next week.
Bye-bye.